We're here to advance the campaigns. Of course, Howie Hawkins for governor, Brian Jones, lieutenant governor, Ramon Jimenez for attorney general, and Teresa Portelli for controller. And they're really a pretty good group of people, wouldn't you say? Huh? Compare them to the competition. Now, I'm going to make some points, and then we're going to take the fundraising to a new level, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So bear with us. I want to thank the Unitarian Church for providing this huge hall. They've overestimated the people who show up, but it's not their fault. Showing up is something we've got to hammer with our friends, relatives, co-workers, neighbors. It all starts with showing up. That's what it all starts with. That's why my favorite bill is the $2 bill. You remember the $2 bill? On the side of the $2 bill, the other side is a picture of all the people who gathered to sign the Declaration of Independence. And we send it around because we like to say, aren't we glad these people showed up? Yeah, they were white men, upper income, but they thought they were signing their death warrant against the biggest military force in the world, the Redcoats, King George III. And we've got to continue to show up again and again and again. And you show up, but you've all experienced what we've experienced. It's like pulling teeth to get people out in their own interest, isn't it? In their own interest. You don't even have to persuade them. They're on your side, but they're always too busy. They always have a reason why they cannot show up for a democratic society and the pursuit of justice. And so I think we really have to emphasize, especially among the younger generation. If you go around the country now with gatherings, you're lucky if you see many people under 40. Most of them are in their 60s. That doesn't bode well for the future. No movement can expand, whether it's the labor movement, the co-op movement, the green movement, whatever, unless it brings in the young people. Now, one way you bring in the young people is you don't dwell on all the misery. You focus on the misery just to get their juices up and get them a little indignant, like what kind of future they have, right? The jobs and industries are being exported abroad through internet, through ships, through all kinds of exporting because of NAFTA and WTO and corporate globalization. We're not producing much that you can actually touch and feel anymore, and we're sending these jobs with the approval of the U.S. government and Wall Street to autocratic regimes abroad who know how to keep their 80-cent per hour workers in their place, don't they, with modern equipment and 70-hour weeks. Those iPhones that you have from Apple, they're made by 300,000 Chinese workers who work 70 hours a week, week after week. They don't have the right to organize. They don't have the benefits. At the best, they get paid $1 an hour. And the company is pretty prophetic because it has nets on the various levels because desperate workers just commit suicide and they just jump out. So they thought it'd be a nice idea to catch them and save them with the nets. This is when you look at Tim Cook and Steve Jobs, and they're all heralded by the young generation. They are producing their profits and their enormous compensation packages on the backs of semi-slave labor in China, and the turnover and the beatings and the brutality that go on. So it is important to sensitize, the young people to these things because it's their future after all, and if they don't shape it, they're going to be diminished by it, destroyed by it, marginalized by it, excluded by it, disrespected by it, gouged by it, constantly driven into a desperate day after day effort to make ends meet and to meet the necessities of life in the richest country in the world. So it's important to get in their minds a lot of the facts that Howie and Matt and others have presented today, but it's more important to get fire in their belly. It's the fire in their belly, it's the normative rage, controlled rage, that breaks their routine, and they reduce the number of text messages, and they start engaging in reality and people-to-people interaction to build the country. And when that happens, they begin to realize that it's easier than they think. The thing that daunts them and daunts most people who like to call themselves justice seekers is that they've exaggerated how difficult it is to make long overdue change. By that I mean, how difficult is it to get a living wage? How difficult is it to get full Medicare, everybody in, nobody out, free choice of doctor? How difficult is it to get paid maternity leave, family sick leave, and child care? How difficult is it to get some budgets for law enforcement against corporate crime, fraud, and abuse? How difficult is it to de-bloat the military budget and reduce the empire that is bleeding us, because all empires will devour themselves, and we are no exception. All empires will devour themselves because they shortchange the people back home as they blast away and occupy and overwhelm and dominate people abroad. How difficult? I'll tell you how difficult. 1% of the people in this country, 1%, that's 3 million people, organized in various ways, like in each congressional district, with a couple offices for full-time people to represent them, and 1% of the people volunteering 200 hours a year each, coordinated all over the country, it's easy now with the internet, for a major redirection of this country in all of these areas that I mentioned, as well as other areas that can be dramatically redirected, as if people matter first. Now, most of the things that I mentioned are already in Western Europe or Canada. They have universal health insurance. They have higher wages. They have better private pensions. They have paid maternity leave. They have better public transit. They have 4 to 7 weeks paid vacation for everybody, whether they're unionized or not. They have better lower income wages. The bottom third is much higher than our bottom, the third. They have tuition-free education. In most, not England now, they flipped, but in most countries, it's like going to high school. They go to the university, they pay $40, $50 in various dues and so on, but it's tuition-free. Now, they were destroyed in World War II, and we were the victors. What's our excuse? How come they got that 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago? How come they have far more powerful cooperatives with huge market share in countries like Switzerland and Sweden and other countries? Because they had a multi-party system, which we do not have. They had stronger labor unions, which we do not have. They're shrinking. And they had stronger cooperatives. But they had something else that we didn't have. They didn't have this stupid, phony free market ideology. There's no free market in this country other than a lemonade stand. These are all corporate rigged markets. Corporate rigged markets in a whole variety of ways. It's traditional price fixing. They're using the government to reduce the competition. Corporate welfare, crony capitalism, bailouts, handouts, subsidies, giveaways, etc. And you cannot have a free market if you do not have freedom of contract. There isn't anybody in this country as a consumer who has freedom of contract. They have to sign on the dotted line with these fine print contracts, which take away your right to go to court, which allow the sellers to unilaterally change it without your consent, whether it's a credit card company or whether it's a bank or whether it's a health insurance. whether it's an auto installment loan, never mind the payday rent-to-own rackets or the payday loan rackets, we have been stripped of our freedom of contract. We are contract serfs, contract peonage. You cannot have a free market without freedom of contract where buyer and seller can negotiate, where buyer can take the seller to court. And that's just one bit of evidence that we don't have a free market, but it gets into the minds of people. Steel workers lose their jobs to companies abroad in Pittsburgh, and they blame themselves. There's a book written on this by Lou Uchitel. They blame themselves for their plight. But in Europe, they didn't have that kind of nonsense. They knew who ran the show, and they were going to make them more accountable. They were going to make them share the wealth that the workers produce. How many times have you heard people say the top 1%, the richest 1% are the job creators? The workers are the profit creators. That's the way you got to talk about it. And in Europe, and in Western Europe, although they're being corporatized globally too, but for 50, 60 years, they said, our standard of living is going to come from wages and salaries, and it's going to come from our taxes. In other words, what do we get for our taxes? Well, we're going to get free university education, we're going to get universal health care, etc. In this country, people think, oh, we only get from what our wages. We're not going to get anything else. We're not getting the residual. Every major industry in this country, you name it, biotech, computer, the internet industries, the containerization industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the aerospace industry, were built on the backs of American taxpayers' research and development coming out of Washington, D.C., and we don't get anything for it. No. All right. Let me tell you how easy it is. We were pushing for a restored minimum wage. 30 million workers make less today in this country than they made in 1968, adjusted for inflation, even though worker productivity has doubled because of automation. Think of that, 30 million workers, okay? So in 2009, after Obama was elected, we'd go to the Congress, we'd go to Trumka, head of the AFL-CIO, make this an issue, make this an issue, make this an issue. They didn't make an issue in 2010, they lost the House of Representatives. They didn't make it an issue in 2012, they lost the House of Representatives. And then they started to make it an issue. And you know how few people made it an issue? I'll tell you how few. About 25,000 workers picketing and with SEIU in front of McDonald's and Walmart are picketing in front of Walmart in Connecticut and other people who weren't employed by these fast food operations. A number of think tanks, a few writers, and a few people like us going on TV, right? Now it is a number one issue for the campaign in terms of economic issue. Even the Republicans are backing off on this because 70–80% of the American people want a restoration of the minimum wage, and if it restores inflation adjusted, it would be about $11 an hour. No big deal, but a lot better than the federal at $7.25. You know how many people pulled this off? You know how many people took it from the back room and made it a front political issue? Fewer than the number of people who live in Torrington, Connecticut. Fewer than 26,000 people making a few efforts, a few hours here picketing, some writing, some talking, some going on the media. That's just an example. All of these changes can be done by the 1% of the people or less organized, as long as they have the public sentiment behind them. And that's why I wrote this book, Unstoppable, because we've got to get out of our cul-de-sac. We've got to stop saying only the liberal, only the progressive, etc. We have a huge consensus in this country. The ruling powers want to divide and rule. So they divide left and right on the areas they disagree. Reproductive rights, school prayer, balanced budget amendment, gun control. And that's where the emphasis is. And suddenly, lo and behold, The left-right agrees on living wage. These are workers. You think conservative workers in Walmart want to stay at $7.50 an hour because of their ideology? They want to put food on the table for their children. Left-right agrees on cracking down on corporate crime, law and order. Left-right doesn't like corporate welfare. They want recreational facilities in the neighborhoods. They don't want some billionaire getting taxes to build a stadium or a ballpark. They want to repair America. Left-right wants to repair America. You think they like to go into broken down schools, broken down buses, drinking water systems leaking and contaminated, sewage systems not kept up to date, libraries, clinics, sometimes they don't even exist. You don't think that's a left-right issue? You don't think it's a left-right issue that they're sick and tired of this empire, this constant military-industrial complex that's ripping off the taxpayer via the Pentagon, hundreds of billions of dollars a year? When they hear the details on that, the way this book has out there? In other words, we have the facts on our side. We live in the golden age of exposés, magazine articles, books. We live in the golden age of prescription, of proposals. You heard Howie, you heard Matt. There are all kinds of solutions. They're right there. They're just on the shelf, being kept off by the oligarchy and the plutocracy. But we got to get people steamed. This is the book to show your friends and neighbors to get people steamed. I took excerpts from the Wall Street Journal exposés, can you imagine? The New York Times, the Washington Post on corporate abuses. It's stunning how much is available. But it's not enough to expose, it's not enough to propose. We got to move to stage 3, which is organizing ourselves and bringing out that 1%. It's really amazing when you drop the myth of divide and rule, you drop the myth of public powerlessness, the people that, can't fight City Hall. When you do that, all kinds of things start coming into place. We see how we're manipulated. We are a society that is taught from school, from elementary school, obey, do not criticize. Believe, do not think. 7th grade, 8th grade, 10th, 11th, 12th, into the colleges that are trade schools now. It doesn't take much. When you're only asked to wake up and get organized, 1% of the people reflecting public opinion out there, left, right, the corporations would be running for cover. We used to do this in the 60s and early 70s. A handful of people brought the coal and steel industry to their knees and had to adhere to the coal mine health and safety laws. A very few people brought the auto industry to their knees so they stopped killing people in a room full of knives called the automobile. A handful of people got lead out of your bodies. A handful of people, led by a Pittsburgh professor, Needleman, got lead out of your kid's body, which led to the ban on tetraethyl lead in gasoline, which when burned got into the air and got into your bodies. You have less lead in your bodies now. Handful of people. Why? Because when it was brought before the mass of the people, they want it. That's the public sentiment. Once you have the public sentiment, 1%, our people are discouraged, they're demoralized, they've given up. And we got to show them it's not as hard as you think. It's easier than you think. And you can show them history, examples in history. You know how powerful the tobacco industry was? Okay, 400,000 dead Americans a year. They controlled Congress. They controlled the media with their ads. Before it was over, there weren't more than 10,000 people, doctors, epidemiologists, organizers, picketers, that got the information, lawyers, litigators, tort lawyers, suing the tobacco companies, getting the information out, gets on 60 Minutes, gets on 2020, gets in the newspapers. Not 10,000 people brought the tobacco industry to heel. When we started challenging smoking in buses, trains, and airlines, people thought we were nuts. What? You're going to get American people not to smoke on a plane? Yeah, we are. Why? Because non-smokers outnumber smokers, and they don't get a kick out of breathing the effusions of the smokers on a plane. And we got them out of the plane, first halfway, and then 1981, we got it all out. A handful of people with public sentiment. Let's get over this powerless syndrome.